He was never president. He never held public office. He never even ran a company you could buy something from. Yet, for a brief, shining moment in history, John Pierpont Morgan was more powerful than the United States government itself. When the entire American economy stood on the brink of collapse, it wasn't the president in the White House who got the call. It was a private banker in New York. When markets crashed and banks failed, he was the one who decided who would be saved and who would be left to die. This is the incredible, almost unbelievable story of J.P. Morgan, the man who held America in the palm of his hand. John Pierpont Morgan was born in 1837, not into a log cabin, but into a world of immense wealth and privilege. This isn't one of those rags to riches stories like Andrew Carnegie or John D. Rockefeller. Morgan didn't start from the bottom. He was educated in the finest elite schools in both America and Europe, groomed from birth to take his place in the world of high finance, and from a very young age his father drilled one core principle into his mind, a lesson that would define his entire life: money isn't just about numbers on a page. Money is about trust, and the person who controls trust controls everything. Morgan began his banking career in a truly wild era. The mid-19th century in America was a time of explosive growth and terrifying instability. The nation was expanding, railroads were crisscrossing the continent, and fortunes were being made overnight. But the financial system was like the Wild West. It was completely unregulated, dangerously unstable, and driven by rampant speculation. Railroads, the backbone of the economy, would boom and then spectacularly bust. Banks failed with alarming regularity, wiping out the life savings of ordinary people. Wall Street wasn't a place for careful investment. It was a casino. To most people, this chaos was just a fact of life. But J.P. Morgan saw it differently. To him, chaos was the enemy of progress. It was bad for business, bad for the country. He believed that what the markets needed, what America needed, was order, discipline, a firm hand to guide it away from the cliff's edge. And he believed, with every fiber of his being, that he was the man to provide it. Unlike his contemporaries who built things, Rockefeller built an oil empire. Carnegie built a steel empire. Morgan didn't build products. He built systems. His genius wasn't in manufacturing. It was in organization. He didn't lay the railroad tracks himself, but he financed them, bringing order to a chaotic and fragmented industry. He didn't invent new technologies, but he backed visionaries like Thomas Edison, funding the creation of the electrical grid. His signature move became known as Morganization. When a major company, often a railroad, was on the verge of collapse from debt and mismanagement, Morgan would step in. He wasn't a gentle savior, he was a ruthless surgeon. He'd take control, slash wasteful spending, fire incompetent leaders, and force warring competitors to the negotiating table. He would restructure the company from the ground up, restoring its financial health and, most importantly, restoring the trust of investors. With each successful reorganization, his power and influence grew exponentially. By the turn of the 20th century, it was almost impossible to look at the American economy without seeing J.P. Morgan's fingerprints. He had a controlling interest in vast networks of railroads, which were the arteries of the nation's commerce. He dominated the world of banking. He was a major force in new industries like electricity, literally lighting up America. His reach was immense, his power unprecedented. Then, in 1901, Morgan made a move that was so audacious, so colossal, it cemented his legend forever. He decided to buy out Andrew Carnegie, the undisputed king of steel. After a quiet negotiation, Morgan purchased Carnegie's entire steel empire for an astronomical sum. But he didn't stop there. He then merged it with several other large steel companies, consolidating them into a single entity. The result was the United States Steel Corporation, or U.S. Steel. It wasn't just a big company. It was the world's very first billion-dollar corporation. Its capitalization was larger than the entire federal budget of the United States. It was bigger than the economies of many nations. To Morgan, this consolidation wasn't about greed, it was about stability. He believed that huge, well-managed corporations were less prone to the boom and bust cycles that plagued smaller, competing firms. Size created order, but to many Americans, this level of power was terrifying. Newspapers and politicians painted him as a monopolist, a puppeteer pulling the strings of the entire economy. The idea that one man, accountable to no one but his partners and his profits, could hold so much power was deeply unsettling to a democratic nation. And then, an event occurred that would prove both Morgan's incredible power and the public's deepest fears. The year was 1907. Without warning, the market plunged. A failed attempt to corner the copper market triggered a wave of panic. People rushed to withdraw their money from banks, which in turn caused a credit crisis. Banks stopped lending to each other. The stock market was in freefall. The entire financial system was grinding to a halt, teetering on the edge of a complete and total collapse. This was the panic of 1907, and here's the most terrifying part: there was no safety net. Today, we have the Federal Reserve, a central bank that can inject money into the system and act as a lender of last resort. In 1907, there was nothing. The U.S. government was powerless. So, in a moment of sheer desperation, the government did the only thing it could. It turned to a private citizen. It turned to J.P. Morgan. What happened next is the stuff of legend. Morgan, then 70 years old, became the de facto commander-in-chief of the American economy. He summoned the presidents of the nation's most powerful banks to his magnificent library on Madison Avenue. For hours, he cajoled, threatened, and commanded them, refusing to let them leave. He literally locked the doors. He forced them to pool their resources and commit millions of dollars to shore up the failing system. He sat like a king, reviewing the books of struggling banks and trust companies, delivering a verdict with a simple nod or shake of his head. He decided which institutions would be saved and which would be allowed to fail. Through sheer force of will and the undeniable power of his reputation, J.P. Morgan single-handedly stopped the panic and saved the American economy from ruin. That moment was a watershed in American history. It was a stunning demonstration of one man's power, but it also exposed a horrifying vulnerability at the heart of the nation. The entire economic well-being of the United States depended on the whims and the health of a single, aging private banker. What would happen if he had said no? What would happen when he was gone? The conclusion was inescapable. America could no longer afford to have its fate in the hands of one man. The direct result of the Panic of 1907 and Morgan's role in it was the creation of the Federal Reserve System in 1913. The government created a central bank to perform the very functions that Morgan had personally undertaken, ensuring that such a crisis would never again fall on the shoulders of one individual. In a way, the modern American financial system was born from the shadow of J.P. Morgan's immense power. Morgan himself was a man of contradictions. He craved power but hated the publicity that came with it. He believed finance should be a quiet, dignified affair, controlled by a small circle of knowledgeable men and understood by even fewer. He was an avid art collector, a devout Episcopalian, and a man who commanded respect, and often fear, wherever he went. J.P. Morgan died in 1913, the same year the Federal Reserve was created. He didn't live to see the new system fully take shape, but his legacy is woven into the very fabric of modern finance. Every time you hear about an investment bank, a corporate merger, or the actions of the Federal Reserve, you are hearing an echo of J.P. Morgan. He didn't invent money, and he didn't build America with his own two hands. But through his mastery of trust and his relentless imposition of order, he controlled it. And for a remarkable time, he controlled America itself. Thanks for watching. If you found this story as fascinating as I did, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the figures who shaped our world. See you next time.